Hi, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Authoritas Tea Time SEO. We have this tea break at 4 p.m. British Summer Time every day, apart from bank holidays. So, no tomorrow and no Monday. And it's a way for people to take a break, connect with others, and learn something new. And thank you to everyone who's been joining us so far. Just have a quick hello to Caitlin. Hello, Caitlin and Estelle and Lawrence. And we'll have a few more people join us shortly. And Christina. Hello, and Mike. Bank holiday kickoff beer for Mike. Okay, great. Well, I'm SEO Joe Blogs, growth marketer here at Authoritas, and I'm joined by Carrie Shepherd, and we have two great guests on today's show. Over to you, Carrie.
Hi guys, so today we have Rachel and Roxana joining us.
So yes, you guys may have seen Roxana was at the Women in Tech SEO Festival organized by Reach. It's a great event, and they'll be talking about reducing site speed. So over to Roxana to introduce herself.
Thank you, Joe. Hello, everyone. Sorry, can't make my camera work for some reason. So my name is Roxana Stingu. I'm heading the SEO department at Alamy, which is a stock photography agency that has a collection of almost 200 million images to date, which means pretty big website. I've previously spent 10 years doing SEO for the hosting industry. And I've worked with brands like 123 in the UK and Host Europe in Germany, and even GoDaddy EMEA. And yes, I am a very proud member of the Women in Tech SEO group. And I have some random hobbies, but I guess the main one is finding John Mueller at every conference and saying hi.
Some great bio and great introduction. Thank you, Roxana. Over to you, Rachel.
Hi everyone, so my name is Rachel Costello and I'm now a technical SEO consultant over at Built Visible. I just moved over a couple of weeks ago from DeepCrawl. So my specialty is in technical SEO. I started off doing kind of social media and content marketing with more of like a general marketing approach. But now I've been specializing in technical SEO over the last few years, and that's kind of where my passion lies. So I do a few different conferences, I do some writing for SEJ, but I'm at my happiest when I'm looking at websites kind of in detail, looking at more of the technical elements like crawling and indexing and web performance, which kind of ties in nicely to this topic.
Great. Well, thank you very much. Well, Roxana and Rachel will give their tips about site speed, and then we will have time for Q&A. So please drop any questions that you have in the chat. We'll have plenty of time for that. And hi, Christina, Arij, and Jose, and Sarah, and Arun. Thank you, everyone, for joining. Over to you, Roxana.
Thank you. So when you invited me to this, I thought it is such a great opportunity to take advantage and just talk about how we can leverage the browser to speed up things when it comes to our websites. And I want to quickly cover two header directives that I think are a bit neglected by the SEO community. First one is browser caching, and we can enable it by using the cache control directive, which pretty much tells the browser to store copies of certain resources on a user's machine the first time they visit. So then when the user visits again, they just load the resources from their local machine, avoiding another download from our servers. And to optimize this, we can start by checking all resources or resource types that load on our websites and decide if they should use browser caching, first of all, and then if they do, for how long should each resource type be cached for. And in my situation, I find it easiest to check each different page template on a website. So for instance, a category page would have a template, and then product pages would have a different template, but they would all kind of use similar resources. So I would check at least one page from each type of template, if not a couple pages, and then just get a list of resources used across the entire website. And then to check the headers, you can either investigate the network tab in Chrome Developer Tools, or you can just run any page speed tool pretty much that tells you which resources could do with longer browser caching times. When it comes to the actual file types, I, for one, prefer to add longer caching times to images, as they don't really change that often. And a good example would be logos, because we really don't rebrand our logos every day. And another example would be all sort of social media icons that once we add them to the site, we don't change them until we do a full redesign anyway. So these ones could have a really long caching time. It gets a bit tricky when it comes to CSS and JavaScript files, as they change more often. So here's where we'd use something called URL fingerprinting. And that is just a fancy way of saying that we should use versioning in our URLs. So when we replace the old resources URLs with the updated ones on our pages, the new ones will be served, overriding the old cache. And there's so much more around this, but we only have 5 minutes each. So I'll just move along to the next header directive, which is the keep alive. Joe, if I can get your assistance in changing the slide. Wonderful, thank you. So this is an instruction for the browser and server that allows a single TCP connection to remain open for multiple HTTP requests and responses. So although some servers have this enabled by default and most browsers nowadays allow persistent connections, you should still first check if your server has this enabled or not, as a lot of shared hosting servers don't. And you can get this information by using tools such as GTmetrix as an example, or any other tools you love, or by just checking the headers of your HTML file yourself. If it's already enabled, a tip would be to check the number of requests that the connection stays on for. And this should ideally cover all the resources you need to make the page useful for the user. So keep the connection alive long enough to download all images and scripts and JavaScript you need to actually start serving a page to the user. And although I know the number of resources you would need can vary greatly from website to website, there are some recommendations out there that say you should probably start at about 50 connections and then adjust from there based on your website. Then also have a look at the keep alive timeout value. Again, this could differ a lot from website to website, but you can set this to start anywhere between 5 to 10 seconds to keep the connection alive, and adjust it from there based on your own website and how many resources you have. And yeah, there are various benefits to optimizing the keep alive settings, but they all just lead to better speed metrics. So it's worth spending 5 minutes and doing some checks. And if you can change the slide, please. Finally, last thing I want to quickly talk about is native lazy loading. This is not a header directive, but it does leverage the browser to speed up page loading times. So I'm sure everybody on the call knows what lazy loading is. And I just want to quickly kind of say what the difference is between regular lazy loading and native lazy loading. So instead of you having to use some custom code or install a separate JavaScript library, you can just tell the browser to postpone loading of some of your images until the user is further down the page. So leveraging the browser to do the hard work for you. It's super easy to get this implemented, as all you have to do is add an extra attribute, which is called loading equals lazy, to the HTML used for your images. And get this, it also works for lazy loading iframes, which is super handy if you use them. And then the attribute can also be applied to picture tags if your website is using responsive images instead. And my final note, I swear after this I'm done. If you're in charge of a WordPress website, you should be super happy, because as of yesterday, native lazy loading has just been added to the WordPress core. So now you can just turn it on and off. No need to install an extra plugin. And that's all from me. I hope you find this helpful.
Yes, that was great. Thank you very much, Roxana. So yeah, everyone will be able to connect with Rachel and Roxana after the chat, or in the chat as well. But yeah, that's a great reference about the WordPress. I just saw that yesterday. I'll pass over to Rachel to share her top tips.
Thanks, Joe. So one of the things I always argue when looking at not just site speed optimization, but general SEO projects is that we should be doing more to kind of focus our efforts on the things that are going to most impact our actual users rather than just relying on things like synthetic testing and synthetic measurements. So what I always argue is that the perception of speed by the user is actually more important than these synthetic metrics. So for example, if a web page loads, the full load time is 6 seconds, but the above the fold content kind of appears, FMP is reached at maybe 1 second, the page becomes interactive, the TTI is reached in 1.2 seconds. The user thinks that the page is loaded in 1.2 seconds because the crucial hero content, the content they have come to your website to see, has loaded and it's clickable, it's usable. They don't know about things that may have been deferred to be loaded, which kind of makes up the overall site speed time. So one of the things that I always recommend focusing on is critical rendering path optimization. That's basically going into the code and looking at things like scripts and other resources that are actually render blocking, which is basically going to stop the browser from painting pixels to the screen. And that's really going to impact the user's experience of the page. So another thing I always advocate for is that kind of one test from one tool using kind of one emulated browser type or device type is never enough of a view of website performance, in that you kind of have to do a bit more digging to see how users are actually browsing and what kind of browsing environments they're experiencing your website with. For example, Adi Osmani, a Google engineer, referenced a study that was done on CNN page load times and how differently the page load times are affected by different device types. So for example, a high-end phone loaded the page 30 seconds quicker than a lower-end device, which is huge in terms of site speed when we're talking about shaving off milliseconds to get improvements. So one of the ways we can actually start to get a better idea of how users are actually visiting our websites is to look in Google Analytics in the audience tab. There's a wealth of insights in there. For example, you can look at device types and browser types to see what are the most common environments that users are accessing your site with. And then you can actually use these insights to then start emulating these environments. So in tools like Chrome DevTools and Web Page Test, you can start inputting these device types and actually see how quickly your page loads or your website loads for these specific environments. You can also look at things like progressive enhancement. So even if a lot of your users are accessing your website on a lower end phone with a more limited CPU, you can make sure that the most critical content is loading for those people, even if their phone can't handle maybe some of the more advanced JavaScript rendering, some of the more advanced features that are kind of nice to have, the bells and whistles. You're making sure that the most crucial content is available for them, no matter the strength of their CPU or the power of their CPU. Next slide, please. Thank you. So the next way we can do a bit more tailoring for the user is to look at different journeys. So like Roxana was mentioning about the different things we can do with browsers in terms of giving them instructions and kind of putting more work on them. Normally the browser will just kind of do its own thing if you don't otherwise instruct it, and it'll just try and load everything at once. So this is where we can use things like resource hints. So you can use different link rel attributes such as preload, prefetch, and preconnect to actually prioritize the different resources we want to be loaded quickly. So for example, your content that appears above the fold, your hero content, you can tell the browser to start loading this as soon as possible. Another thing I'd recommend playing around with, and this is something I follow very closely because I find this really fascinating, is Guest.js. So this is actually a tool that you can use which uses machine learning that takes your Google Analytics data and it then predictively models user journeys. So for example, it will take a page and it will map out the most likely journeys it thinks that the user is going to take from that page. So the links it thinks the user is most likely to click next from that page, it will actually prefetch those. So before the user kind of even gets to the next page, it started prefetching, it started loading. So their experience is really seamless and really quick. So another way we can kind of optimize for the user is by looking at different connection types. So for example, another thing I'd recommend checking out for user-centric optimization improvements is using the network information API a bit more. So this can actually use the user's kind of connection type and monitors that, and it can kind of you can give it instructions to serve different types of content depending on their connection type. So for example, if you were originally going to show a video, you can set the settings to say, right, if the user's on 4G connection, serve the video as normal. That shouldn't be too strenuous on their journey. But however, if it notices that the user drops down to say 3G or even worse 2G, you can then set instructions to swap out a video and, for example, to serve a static image instead, which is going to be much less resource intensive and isn't going to impact the user's journey too much. So kind of my key takeaway through all of this is that there's a lot we can do to really kind of empathize with our users, to understand actually how they're browsing our websites, how they're experiencing our websites, because us doing tests on our high-end work machines isn't going to kind of tell you the full picture of a user who's kind of on their phone on a 2G network. They're just going to get really frustrated, and we really need to understand these different browsing experiences. That's all from me.
Great, thank you very much, Rachel. So many tips, and so many tips from Roxana as well. We've got quite a few comments here in the chat, and I'll say hello to Simon for coming, and Corey, Monse, hello, Arun, Simon as well. So yeah, there's lots of a nice comment from Arij. Roxana and Rachel complement each other perfectly, and great to see the wide range of actionable tips within 10 minutes. Yes, quite a challenge. So thank you very much. And we've got some questions ourselves.
Yeah, so in terms of page speed, how much would you say it affects your My SEO?
Well, I'd say site speed underpins everything. It's one of the most important aspects of kind of the UX hierarchy of needs. So before a user can even kind of go in and see or optimize content, see all of the great kind of hierarchies you've set internally and all the kind of internal linking optimization you've done, they have to be able to access your site first, and all this great work can just be gone to waste basically if your site loads too slowly and the user doesn't have the patience to kind of stick around while your website loads to see all of that great content. So I'd say it is really important.
And just to kind of add to what you said, Rachel, yes, page speed complements everything else you do in SEO. And the worse your page speed is and the more you improve it, the bigger gains you see. So if you take a page from, if it loads the above the fold in about 5 seconds and you shave half a second off, that will actually show a lot of improvement. So, every little small thing matters, and the more of them you do, the more it improves your website and increases your chances of getting more traffic.
Could you put that down into, I would say, time? So, how long it took you to improve the speed of the website, and over what time period did you see maybe an increase in traffic? Only because, playing devil's advocate here, some people say, oh, well, we've got so much to do, page speed isn't that important. So do you both have some case studies where, for example, it took maybe 8 hours to get everything ready, changed the page speed, you obviously improved it, and then you saw a big impact on traffic after X amount of days?
I'd say I've done this quite recently, and it really depends. As Rachel said, it's perceived speed. So if you're playing around with third-party resources and moving those around, those will not really have a big impact on perceived speed because they tend to load after you're above the fold anyway. So from that point of view, some people might say, oh, I did all of this and I didn't see any improvements. And that might be the reason why. But if you are working towards speeding up the time it takes to load the above the fold elements that Google would probably measure you on, then you'd probably see impact on traffic. I would say, not right away in the sense of immediately, instantly, but as soon as Google gets to crawl the majority of your pages that had the changes, you should see the impact on traffic as well.
Okay, and can we ask, what would you recommend then for this the fairest tool then to use to measure your site speed?
In terms of tools, you can use anything. And I think, Rachel, you probably have as well a collection of tools, and you prefer one for a metric and another one for another metric. And it's also about what you're checking in terms of speed, if you want to use real user metrics or if you want to use synthetic tools because you just did one change locally and you want to see what impact that would have. So you would use, let's say, Lighthouse just to check some quick things, but then you'd want to monitor the data you get in Google Analytics for your page speed report to see how that's actually impacting real users coming to your site from different locations. But do keep in mind that is super sampled. So you only get about 1% of your pages in Google Analytics, but it's still good because it's real user metrics.
Yeah, I'd add to that that it's really important to have a mix of both kind of synthetic measurements and real user measurements. So I always say that PageSpeed Insights is one of my go-to tools. The Google team have put a lot of work into kind of improving it and all the different reports and even making it really actionable. So it kind of helps us getting buy-in easier because you can kind of show to your client or your boss, look, if we implement this change, we can shave off exactly these amount of seconds. So you can kind of see impact from that. And I think because they use the Crux data, the Chrome User Experience Report data, you can actually see kind of bands of how much real users were impacted by kind of the load speed of your site. So I always recommend that. And I always really like to use kind of Chrome Dev Tools for more kind of closer digging into like the code and network and performance and things like that. There's loads of different tools. I've actually written a blog post on this, which I'm going to share out on Twitter with a few different tools you can use. So yeah, watch out for that.
Great, thank you.
We have a comment from Lawrence. So how far do you go with page speed improvement before you reach the point of diminishing returns from the page spent on improving page speed?
Can I get this one, please? You never stop. You always optimize because as you're improving things, marketing adds more third-party services to your site and breaks stuff. And then you have to go in again and find different solutions and different improvements to accommodate the tools they need, but still have the best performance ever. Or new features are added to the site. So you have to look at those as well. So I would say it never really stops. You just keep improving everything as much as you can.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. It's all about ongoing monitoring, not just doing a spot check every now and again when you do kind of a quarterly audit or something. It's something that needs to be kind of kept an eye on. As like Roxana said, people are making changes to websites all the time. Technical debt adds up quicker than you'd like it to. So yeah, definitely an ongoing thing.
And not to mention, and sorry for coming back to this again, but we used to be on HTTP1, so we were told like reduce the number of resources you have because you can only download 6 to 8 at a time. So we did that. We combined JavaScript files and we combined CSS. And then we got HTTP2 that said, you know, the time it takes for your biggest resource to download, that's the time it takes for all resources. And it's like, oh, now split all those JavaScript files and split all those CSS files. So it's like the internet is evolving and so is page speed optimization.
Thanks. Well, it sounds like, yes, it's with our online marketing field, there's always new things to learn. Oh, hi, Alice. We have Alice as well here. And Sarah, Alice asked, can you repeat the name of that Chrome tool, Rachel?
It's Chrome Developer Tools. So it's a plugin that you can add to Chrome that you can just kind of get in the browser extensions area, and you can just kind of, I think that's one of the tools that's mentioned in my guide. So I'm going to tweet it out, but feel free to kind of DM me on Twitter or send me a message and I can kind of share more details with you.
Great. I think we have just another question actually from about international websites. Are there any specific advice for international websites with lots of traffic from different regions on how to diagnose issues? So I think this is a case Yeah, if you're managing obviously more than one for your brand.
With international websites, it does get a bit tricky because you really just need to look where the bulk of your traffic is coming from. And I don't mean just country, I also mean browsers. So you have to check, do most of your users come from browsers that support HTTP2? If so, that should be your main strategy. If most of them actually come from browsers that don't, then you should optimize for HTTP 1.1, because HTTP2 is not really going to help the bulk of your traffic. So I would say it's not as much location as it is browser and browser version and what those browsers actually support in terms of what can help you speed up the website. So that's, SSL 1.2, it's going to get faster on 1.3, but not a lot of browsers support it. So should you invest in that now? Maybe not, maybe wait a bit until at least half of your traffic would benefit from it. So yeah, it could be country based as well, because for instance, you have countries like India where they use mostly mobile devices and not desktop. So then you definitely need to make sure you optimize your mobile website to be as fast as possible. So from that point of view, yes, optimize for certain countries using certain devices more than others.
And I would say in terms of international sites, one thing to watch out for is the way that you can kind of configure, say, for example, your hreflang configuration and different kind of on-page tags. Because if you have kind of thousands of different variations of different language and country codes, and you're adding them all in the source code, then that can actually really add up in terms of site speed. It can actually impact overall site speed. So it's about being smart about how you're serving these different signals and link attributes. For example, you can add all your hreflang links kind of in sitemaps, for example, to kind of take some of the strain off the page itself. So it's just looking for kind of quicker wins. We can move some of these kind of resources and requirements off page and kind of serve them to Google and other search engines in other ways. I think that's always worth looking into.
Great, thank you. Some good tips.
So we have a question from Joe. Any advice on how to quantify the value of a PageSpeed project? Clients frequently want this to impact revenue, but the Google tools aren't really great at doing this.
I think Google has a website. It's called Think with Google. You put in your domain, it calculates your current speed. You can compare it to your competitors. So this would be overall site speed from Google's metrics. It's not going to be page speed. But it also gives you a calculator where you can put in how many sessions you get and what conversion rate you currently have with the current speed you have, and then what speed improvement you're looking to make. And that gives you a calculation of how many more sessions and what improvement in conversion rate you can expect based on those improvements.
Yeah, I think is there another tool called TestMySite? I think they've kind of, as Google have been focusing more and more on page speed, they've been kind of adapting and changing and merging tools. But yeah, I think you're exactly right that there's a bit of a slider where you can kind of set your conversion rates and site speed and improvements and what that'll reflect back into revenue. I think in terms of kind of monitoring the impact of your work, I'd always recommend closely monitoring maybe a subset of pages. Maybe if you change kind of one page template and make some changes there, it's about kind of documenting these minute changes that have been made and then kind of setting up ongoing monitoring systems of page speed. So for example, when I used to work at DeepCrawl, we kind of had a way of injecting Chrome insights from the browser in terms of speed that you could then set up with your crawl. So if you use other crawling tools, you can kind of set ongoing monitoring there, and then you can kind of see over time how quickly your site is kind of loading, but then look at that in terms of trending. So when you have that trend data, ongoing speed trend data, which you can then map against actions taken in terms of fixing code, optimizing site speed, and then overlaying kind of conversion metrics from like Google Analytics, for example, you can start layering different data sources and even start tracking back specific changes to overall impact in terms of revenue. But I would recommend going back and having a look, because I think Google have been working on those tools recently. So hopefully those will be a bit more useful now. But yeah, I'm sure myself and Roxana will be happy to kind of answer any kind of further questions you have on that, because that is a really difficult thing, definitely, to kind of measure. Well, and everything we do in SEO is to kind of measure the revenue impact, isn't it? So yeah.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
Okay, and we have time for one last question. So from Fateh, your pick of a go-to tool for A to Z SEO audit.
Oh, yikes, this is a difficult one. And all the tool makers will hate me for this, but I always say our brains are the best tools we have, and our experience, and that's because we can use a crawler to get the information, but we can't really analyze it. And it's the same with speed. You can use all these tools to get your speed audits, but they're not going to tell you what to do. You still kind of have to look on your own website that's going to be different than everybody else's website, and kind of figure it out by yourself. So I would say, any free tool you can get your hand on. I'm sure, most of them are excellent. You don't need to pay for all of them, but yeah, use your head as much as you can. And in order to do that well, you need to read a lot of information on everything if you want to be able to, know enough to make the connections you need to.
Yeah, I'd say on top of that, there's a lot you can do. I'd say Chrome is a really good kind of tool to use. I mean, in terms of browser extensions, like I keep mentioning, I'm really obsessed with Chrome developer tools, because there are just so many different tabs and facets of the tool in terms of going down into the details of what JavaScript resources you have on your site, kind of emulating different device types, different connection types, and checking rendering. You can also get, for example, like the Lighthouse plugin as well to look at speed metrics. But yeah, like Roxana mentioned, kind of digging into the details of what is actually happening on a page, looking at kind of template issues and resources on a site can actually impact like the wider website itself. So if you're looking kind of on a page by page basis, you can actually get some really quick wins there. But yeah, there's so many different options. I think that's a difficult question to answer.
Great. Well, thank you very much. You guys have answered a lot of questions. You shared a lot as well today. These will be available. Carol will be writing a blog post, and we'll have a link to the slides as well on SlideShare. Thank you all for coming today. And we also have our next session actually will be on Tuesday. So everyone have a nice long bank holiday weekend, where we have Tamara Warren and Alice Morgan. I think Alice has joined us today. And they'll be talking about the importance of EAT and your blog strategy. But thank you very much, Rachel and Roxana, for coming today. And we will be having Tea Time SEO all through April. We'll also have it into May as well. So if you do want a opportunity to be one of the speakers, please contact us. You have our details. Carrie's been sending some of the emails with the agenda for the week and some of the write-ups. So please just reach out to us. Great to have you on board.
Thank you for having us, and thank you everyone for all your lovely comments and questions.
Yeah, thanks so much. It's been really fun.
Thank you.
Thank you. Oh, and thanks to John. I didn't say see you yet. John, hi John, Raf, Caitlin. Thank you very much everyone for joining. See you on Tuesday at 4 p.m. Have a good Easter, or a long break.